Hello and welcome to Practically Magick. Today I am your energy healer, Courtney Pearl, and today's episode we are going to talk about the energy exchange of gossip. And before we get into it, I know I've already teased and tantalized you into what our topic is today. It's a very fascinating and interesting topic I can't wait to dive into. Before we do that, I'm going to pull a card. Today I am using my Luna edition, the Tarot, Ethereal Visions Tarot. And let's get into it. I love this deck because it has a real prismatic foil to it. It's very shiny and beautiful. And if you cannot see because you're listening to the audio version, then pop over to YouTube and watch the video. You will see what I am talking about. It's a beautiful deck. Luna, meaning the moon. And, for this episode today, I have pulled the Hanged Man, which, again, for those who are not familiar with tarot, might find this to be a little bit creepy or scary. But actually, the Hanged Man is not hanging by his neck. He's hanging by his feet, and he's hanging upside down from the branches of the Yggdrasil tree. It represents or has a very close tie to the story and mythology of Odin, who hangs from the tree and sacrifices his eye for the gift of wisdom from the Nons. He gets the wisdom of the runes. And if you're not familiar with that story, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a different episode where we do some folklore and mythology. The reason why I think it's fascinating that this card has come up for our subject today is because we are going to talk a lot about give and take. We're going to talk about energy exchange and how there is something to be gained and there is something to be lost when it comes to an energy exchange like the like engaging in gossip, right? And so the Hanged Man often represents something to do with giving something up, a sacrifice of some kind, in order to get something back. And I've decided to do this topic in particular today because we've had something of a little bit of a conflict happening. And it's really interesting that during this conflict that's happening between two members of our community, another member of our community, Cambria Davis, who you've seen as a guest on my show. She's Daybreak's local astrologer. She has actually been taking mediation training. And it was interesting because we were kind of conversing among the leadership group of the Daybreak Network, which we all head up as a community of people who have different entrepreneurial projects, businesses, nonprofits in our community. And it's an opportunity for us to gather and meet. And as we're the team lead people, the people in charge of these gatherings, we were having a group conversation about this conflict between two members of our group because we wanted to see how much we are needed in mediating this conflict or stepping in, or how much we should just pull out of it and let it play out how it's supposed to, and kind of wondering what our role is in all of that. And it's interesting because one of our team people, I won't call out who exactly, but I felt like they were uncomfortable with our discussion about this subject because I feel that they probably do their best in all situations to stay out of things. And I tend to agree with that most of the time. But in this particular situation that we've been experiencing, we have someone whose behavior is not as conducive to a supportive role, or is not facilitating a sort of all-inclusive atmosphere for the other person in the conflict to feel welcomed and included in being able to come to our meetings and to be able to feel that they have a community. So it was kind of like it's either me or you situation where not both people felt welcome to attend meetings. And so this got me thinking a lot about gossip. Now, you will remember, I've referenced this before, but I was reading this book, The Caliban and the Witch. Silvia Federici, I hope I'm saying that right, Federici. She is coming from a sort of Marxist view and looking at and taking that view a step beyond into a feminist approach when she looks at the history of women. It's Women, the Embodiment and Primitive Accumulation is the name of this book. So I'm going to reference some of her talk on gossip here today as we get into our subject. And I want to talk about the history. She brings this up a lot in the book. And so I want to talk about how the role of women went through a transition in the Middle Ages as we were moving from feudalist caste system to a capitalist system in the from the 1400s into the 1500s, right? So at the time, so we're talking about England around the year 1500. She talks about gossip, which is derived from an Old English term for godparent, combining god, meaning akin, and sib, which indicated women who are companionships at birth. So let's take ourselves back in time as we look at the community aspect of women in that time period. Women were doing almost everything together, from the time they were little to the women of an older age. In all of their activities, they were, as a community, sewing together, canning and prepping meals together. They were creating a relationship that is very much different than our culture today. Today we have friendships. Women have friendships and collaborations with each other, but they very rarely extend beyond the times during the day that we happen to coexist, right? Like our work relationships, or if we're working inside the home, we see each other on a social basis, but not necessarily working together. We're working inside of our own homes, isolated from each other most of the time nowadays. And so women talking together about the community, about other people in the community, about what people are going through, what's going on. It was very much a day-to-day, all day, everyday practice, right? It was not shamed. It was absolutely just a part of the culture. When it became a shameful act to gossip, when it became gossiping was then preached about over the pulpit and told that it was sinful to engage in that kind of activity, would have been during the shift where patriarchal power was needed to be able to separate and isolate women from each other in order to hold some kind of authority and power over them. So in a sense, women were made to feel like that sort of interaction with each other was shameful and sinful and prideful and shouldn't be acted upon at all. As it's quoted in the book, as the status of women fell, their independence in speech and social formations with other women quickly became a threat. So I want you to take that into consideration, because this is where this shift into gossiping being bad would have been seen and perpetrated by the powers and authorities that be. Now, I want to shift this into what I understand as energy exchange, okay? So, yes, certain forms of gossip can leave one person feeling drained of energy rather than having a buildup of energy. So how do we tell the difference? Because surely gossip, especially it is looked at in history, as I just pointed out, it must have been a form of protection and power for women to have been exchanging it together. And by the way, I'm saying this in terms of women, but it's not as if women are the only ones who gossip. This is just how it was perceived at the time in order for it to be labeled as shameful. And I think oftentimes, even still, there is the aftermath of that sort of mentality, because we still associate gossiping as a women's activity rather than a social activity for all genders and people. And when men gossip, or when they talk together, it's not often associated as shameful. It's associated as socializing. So I am pointing that out to let people know that, yes, often when women engage in that sort of activity, it's labeled as gossip, and that it is also corresponding with a shameful activity. And I just want to point out that in this particular situation that I'm talking about with this group, the person that I felt was maybe wanting to step back from it or tell us, let's just stay out of it. Let's let them handle it. Was a man versus all of the women who were discussing it and talking about what is to be handled here. Now, as I said, most of the time I agree it's stepping back and being out of the situation. However, when it comes to situations where we need to discuss it because it is an act of protection and information that is needed, that's probably how gossiping was most of the time engaged with in the historical times I'm talking about. It would be like women discussing certain men that are safe and certain men in their society that are not safe. If an event or an activity happened that would potentially need to be shared with the other women in the village or the other women in the community, it would be because you need to watch out for this person. Their behavior has shown signs of being an unsafe person, and I want to make sure that my fellow women and my fellow community know that so they can be cautious and careful. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In this particular situation with the conflict between two people in our group, one person has exhibited a behavior of victim mentality, of blasting people who have offended them and being very public and open about how they've been offended by someone, and they're going to share it all over the community. In a sense, whether their information is correct or not, they are strongly pushed by a feeling of, I need to feel validated and I need to feel protected and I need to gather my community around me by making sure everybody knows what I just went through and what has happened. And in some cases, the information that they are spreading about the perpetrator, about the person that offended them, is sometimes not accurate. And I want to invite people who feel a sense of being the victim and wanting to tell their story, as they often say it. I'm just telling my story. I'm telling what happened to me. I want other people to know what happened. The purpose behind sharing that, or inviting a person to do some healing work on themselves because they feel uncomfortable and they feel offended, is part of the question that we're asking ourselves here. So yes, a person does have the right to speak about what has happened to them and how they felt about it. However, when it alienates and isolates another person and creates a split in the community, that begs the question on whether or not, who is it helping and who is it hurting by sharing that information? And that is the question I would like to propose today in the topic of gossiping. Gossiping or talking to a person about someone else, it does give us a chemical need. Just like addiction to certain things, we do get a chemical need when we engage with this kind of social interaction. We get dopamine, we get endorphins, we feel kind of that good and powerful feeling that we get when we say, hey, I have information to share with you about someone we know. Now, that's not saying whether it's good or bad. I don't believe in good or bad. I believe in awareness of what it is we're getting out of it. So that's the payoff. The payoff is I'm getting a sense of feeling powerful and in control and connection. It does give us oxytocin as well, because that connection with the person we're speaking to, it's like, hey friend, I have information about someone we know, and this is going to make me feel connected to you if I share it with you. Now, asking yourself whether it's going to give you energy or whether it's going to drain you of energy, here are some things I came up with to help us kind of sort that out. Remember in last episode, we talked about engaging with art, how healing through art can be a really powerful modality for art, for healing, and it connects us with our authentic self. Well, we can use those same guidelines in whether we're engaging with gossip and it's going to help us feel authentic, or if it's going to help us feel as if it strays from that authenticity. And when it strays from authenticity, it cannot help but drop in energy level, because the energy levels, which we've discussed in previous episodes, that is in the book Power versus Force, we talk about how there is the top. Enlightenment and authenticity is in energy level of 1,000, right? And everything else is categorized at energy levels all the way down to the bottom, which is shame at energy level 20. So we have all these calibrations of energy levels we can engage with. If what we're doing is engaging with an energy level that is not authentic, then it's going to be dropping our energy level. And we can tell by saying, is this actually connecting me to not only the person I'm speaking to, but to creative energy or source or higher power? Does it connect me in that way? Does it offer a space of curiosity? I wonder what is happening. I wonder what's going on. Does it invite compassion for self and for maybe the person you're speaking about? Compassion. And I think this kind of is a tricky one, because I think you have to be careful when you do the good old Southern bless her heart. You know, when it's like, I'm really worried about so-and-so, so I'm going to tell you all about these things that they've done, things that they've things that have been going on with them. Am I telling you in a sort of a space where it's like, oh, she has been cheating on her husband, bless her heart. And really what you're doing is you're just really, really actually excited to share information about them that is nobody else's business. So be careful about that. Is it true, authentic compassion, or is it simply just I'm pretending to be compassionate so that I can gossip and feel better about myself? Is it still ego that's getting in the way of this sharing of information? Is it building or uplifting? Now, I really have to be careful with this one, because you have to understand that gossiping in some sense or another is still going to be a destruction of some kind. And there may be a destruction of relationships happening here with the engagement of gossip. I may be understanding information about someone or something that I need to know because they are exhibiting patterns that are pretty destructive. And they may be doing that to serve needs of their own. However, I still think some information needs to be shared even when it destroys the relationship, because only upon destroying a relationship can you begin to rebuild. Destruction, chaos, and rebirth are all part of a process. So I am not going to say that the destruction of a relationship means that it is bad or negative, or it's going to necessarily tear things down to a low energy level, because at some level there needs to be destruction in some cases in order for rebuilding to happen. Some of the information shared with me about how a person has engaged without my knowledge in my reputation, that someone has gone around saying, don't hire Courtney for this, hire me for this. that sort of competitive behavior, it's not something I try not to engage with. But if somebody else is engaging in that way, it's helpful for me to know. So I know, okay, that's a space that they are in. That's how they are choosing to engage with that. I still want to show up for people in support of them. Even if they feel like they're competing with me, I want to show up in a space where I support them and their endeavors. So I might still say, I'm sorry that you feel that way about me. However, I am still hoping that you are successful and hoping that you find reconciliation with your work and your relationships. So, is it uplifting and benefiting the whole? Then on the opposite end of that, if it's going to be a drain on my energy, it's in engaging with gossip, does it come from a place of judgment? Judging whether something is good or bad? Does it give me that thrill to connect with the person that I'm speaking to? Because what's going to happen is it's going to feel thrilling in the moment. And then when I disengage with the conversation, I am probably going to feel that energetic draining later. I'm going to walk away from the conversation and go, oh, should I really shared all that? Or should I have said the things that I said? Oh, now I'm questioning it because it feels draining. It feels like I engaged with something that took my energy from me, when in the moment it felt like a thrill to share information. It probably was still not okay to engage with that energy. And then, does it show our own insecurities or those insecurities of others? Is it scrutinizing others? So ask yourself these questions when you're engaging with something like the act of gossiping. I am not here to tell you that, just like religious church leaders have done for a long time and over a pulpit saying, gossip is bad, don't do any of it, it's a sin, it goes against God. That's not necessarily true, and that is not how I view it. But I think the best way to handle certain things, especially if you are the subject of gossip, which in this case I have been, with this situation I'm talking about in our group, I am the subject of some of that gossip, and then someone else is the subject of attack. And because someone is in great pain and has felt very violated, they feel that retaliation is the best way to handle it, and to go publicly and say all the ways publicly that they have felt violated. When in truth, there may have been another perspective to consider. Compassion for all parties is my best advice moving forward. I have reached out to the person who was potentially the perpetrator of this person's victimhood and said, I have gotten to know you and your energy, and I know that there's a lot more to this story than this other person is publicly stating. They are hurt, clearly, or they wouldn't be acting this way. But the energy that I feel is that this kind of outburst is only going to hurt them and their reputation more so than you. And I feel that I can support both of you in your own separate spaces. But because of this person's behavior and how they've chosen to retaliate, I may not want to work with them on a level of putting myself at risk, because it seems that these two parties were working very well together, at least outwardly, until they weren't. And then this other person chose to be public about their experience in the breakup of their relationship. And because I know that to be their pattern, they've done this several times already, it will be far less likely that I will want to work collaboratively with them, because I wouldn't want to subject myself to that kind of retaliation if something were to go wrong, and even if I was to unintentionally offend them. I know myself, and I know I don't go around intentionally offending people, but it does happen. I'm not for everybody, and maybe some of the actions that I've taken have hurt people unintentionally. And so I would hate to work with somebody that I was in fear of, or in fear of like walking on eggshells with them. So in sharing that information amongst ourselves, what's happening, what the patterns are, what the patterns of behavior are, it is just allowing each and every person to, in the community, interact with each other with that knowledge. Now, I know I've used a lot of someone and something and this and that, and it's a very vague and elusive. That's because I don't want anyone in particular to be called out. I just want to use this example of a situation in the energetic exchange of how gossip can, one, be powerful and can actually support and build community, while at the same time, it can be destructive and it can exhaust our energy. So being careful about how you engage with it, and then knowing that the ultimate goal is to be compassionate. I know this person who is engaging in behavior I wouldn't necessarily do myself or would want to put myself in connection with. I know that they themselves are going through really hard things and healing, and on their healing journey as well. And so we all choose to do things because we are hoping to get a need met. She's engaging with that behavior because she's hoping it will meet a need that she has. It may ultimately end up costing her more relationships. And that's something that she will have to be aware of and will have to work through on her own. Or she'll blame us, other people in the community, for not connecting with her or having a relationship with her, when really we're just choosing to stay out of those patterns for ourselves, for our own protection. And that for every person I engage with, no matter what they do or how they do it, I hope and support and want the best for them. And I think that that's part of the setting the ego aside or going through a difficult conflict can be an egoic death in allowing some part of our ego to be crushed and destroyed, sometimes painfully so that we can evolve and grow and move on. And I hope that this situation, as uncomfortable as it is, can allow an opportunity for all of us as a community to grow. And I hope that the person who feels alienated can feel comfortable enough again at some point to return back to the community and know that they are welcomed and loved. Oh, so I don't know if that ties into anything that you have experiencing from wherever you are, or if you have had situations like that come up. I would love to hear your stories. If you have a particular situation in which a family or community groups that you're a part of have had certain conflict that you thought were very tricky, or you weren't sure how to navigate it, or you were part of the conflict, or you were kind of on the sidelines, as I am in this situation, and how you handled that. So please write in your stories to me. I would love to hear them. You can find me on social media. I'm at Instagram at prism_healing. You can message me on my website, prism-healing.com, or on Facebook, Courtney Pearl's Prism Healing. And those are great spaces to get connected with me. And I love hearing stories from a listener or questions from a listener if you'd like to be featured in a future episode. As we get ready to finish this episode, I hope that some of this has helped you today and helps you to be more aware and more understanding of your energy levels and how to be protective of those. I would like to give special thanks to Just Blaine at Ride the Wave Media for producing this and every one of my podcasts, and doing all of the hard work of putting it all on our own YouTube channel so that both Practically Magick, the podcast, and Ride the Wave Media, and all their network of podcasts can be built into the empire that it will become. And empire is probably not the right word, but I feel like it's becoming a great community of its own. I would like to thank Sarah at Sunshine Community because she facilitates and navigates these tricky situations we've discussed today very well and very gracefully, and I super duper appreciate her for that. She's a magical person in and of herself. So if you don't know, Sarah Albert at Sunshine Community, and you can become a part of that community as well. Let's see what else. All right, I have a couple of announcements coming up. If you are local in Daybreak or the surrounding areas of Daybreak, I have my body, my dance party that Practically Magick is hosting at Land of a Thousand Hills Coffee and Social here in Daybreak, right there in front of Novel Crescent Communities. We are putting on a very kind of small and intimate, but also large enough to be a real true party. Just Blaine at Ride the Wave Media is going to be our DJ, and we are doing that on March 20th. You can get tickets on my website, prism-healing.com. If you go to the events section, you will see all of the classes and events I have coming up, and you can purchase a ticket to that event. 10% of profits for tickets, are going to be donated to Daybreak Pride. So if you want to help support the Pride community in Daybreak, purchase your ticket and plan on coming and dancing. It is a women and queer folk only event. So if you are a woman or those that support them, you can purchase a ticket for yourself and come. We're going to be dressed in sweats and comfy clothes, and we are just going to dance our hearts out for the whole evening. And we're celebrating spring. And if the weather's good, we're going to open the door and have it go outside too. It's going to be a blast. They are already putting together a special drinks menu for the event at Land of a Thousand Hills. So please get your tickets before they sell out, because we can only sell 80 tickets for this event. It's going to be amazing. I also have some online classes coming up. So if you would like to take my online altars and sacred spaces class that I will be teaching March 23rd, it is an online class at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So on a Sunday, we are going to learn all about creating altars, and whether that means an official pagan altar for you, or if it just means how do I connect with creating spaces in my home and in my outdoor spaces that feel like connecting to self, connecting to land, connecting to source. This is a fantastic class that I've put together with a lot of fun resources and really, really great materials. So those are a couple of things I have coming up. If you would like to sign up for those classes, please message me and look for me on my website. I think that is all the announcements today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you next time. Go make magic, witches and wizards.